My sister decorated my entire house for my daughter's birthday and said, she deserves a real celebration. As we ate cake, she looked around and said loudly, this is the first time this place has felt like a home. I froze. I just wanted her to feel celebrated, Nora said as we cleaned up the last of the birthday plates. She deserves that, doesn't she? Then she added, loud enough for our guests to hear, this is the first time this place has felt like a home. I froze in the middle of wiping frosting off a chair. The room went quiet for a second, but Nora just kept stacking plates like she hadn't just hit me with the heaviest sentence I'd heard in years. I'm Helen, 45, recently divorced, and mom to Ruby, who just turned 8. 3 months ago, I moved back to Charleston, the city I swore I'd never return to. Back into the same creaky Victorian house where I grew up, the one I left behind when I was 22 and desperate to be anywhere but there. It was supposed to be temporary. My ex-husband, Derek, blindsided me with divorce papers last summer. We were married for 11 years, and things had been distant, sure, but I didn't think he'd leave me and Ruby to shack up with a 29-year-old woman he met at a retreat. I was out of work, emotionally wrecked, and had nowhere to go in Chicago. My lease was ending. Ruby needed stability. I needed something. I hadn't spoken to my sister Nora in over 4 years at that point. We weren't on bad terms, not exactly. Just distant. Stretched thin by years of unspoken resentment and silence. We grew up in a house that was functional from the outside but hollow on the inside. Our mother, Celeste, was bitter and often cruel. Our father was emotionally absent. Nora and I survived by finding our own ways to cope. Hers was to comply. Mine was to run. When I called her ashamed, desperate, she didn't hesitate. Come home, she said. We'll figure it out. So Ruby and I packed up what we had left and drove across the country. Nora met us at the airport with a bag of snacks for Ruby and hugged me for the first time in years. She had that same careful look in her eyes I remembered from when we were kids, like she was afraid if she blinked, everything would collapse again. The house was still standing. That shocked me. I expected dust, rot, disrepair. Instead, I found a home that had clearly been tended to. Nora had painted the kitchen a soft yellow, fixed the broken steps on the porch, and added plants to the windowsills. I didn't recognize the space, but I also didn't feel like it was mine. Ruby, of course, adored it immediately. She called it Grandma's house, even though Celeste had passed 5 years ago. I didn't correct her. Nora lived across the street with her husband Dale and their teenage son, Mason. She'd stayed in Charleston all these years close to home, even when home was hard. She cared for our mother when she got sick. She did the paperwork after she died. She took on the emotional labor I never could. And for a long time, I resented her for that. I thought staying meant she accepted the way things were. But now I'm starting to think maybe she was just stronger than I gave her credit for. Still, we weren't exactly rebuilding a relationship overnight. We talked about logistics, school enrollment, furniture, doctor's appointments. But the deeper stuff? That stayed buried. We kept our conversations light, and I kept most of my boxes unpacked. Then Ruby's birthday started creeping up. I hadn't planned anything. Between part-time cleaning jobs, applying to receptionist roles, and trying to find my footing as a single parent again, I didn't have the energy. Or money. Nora noticed. I can help with the party, she said one morning as we sipped coffee on the porch. Or even host it. I'm fine, I said automatically. She didn't push. Just nodded. But I saw the hesitation in her eyes. The part of her that still felt responsible for everything, even me. That night, I sat on my bed and cried because I had no idea how I was going to pull together even a simple birthday for Ruby. No cake, no decorations, no guest list. I felt like a failure all over again. I didn't sleep well. Ruby woke me up the next morning screaming with delight. I ran downstairs thinking something was wrong, only to find her barefoot on the porch, staring wide-eyed at the front yard. There were streamers across the trees. pink and purple balloons tied to the banister. A big sign on the front door that said, "Happy birthday, Ruby." Inside, the living room had been transformed. There was a buffet table filled with snacks, a unicorn cake in the center, and even a stack of wrapped presents. All themed. All carefully curated. My daughter squealed and ran straight into Nora's arms, who was already inside setting up party hats. "She deserves a real celebration," Nora said to me, not unkindly. I tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. People came. Neighbors. A few kids from Ruby's school. Even Mason showed up and played DJ for a little bit. Everyone complimented how beautiful everything looked. How happy Ruby was. And she was. Beaming. Laughing. Running around with frosting on her nose. It was everything I wanted to give her but hadn't. As we cut the cake, Nora looked around at everyone and said too loud, too casually, "This is the first time this place has felt like a home." And just like that, the floor dropped out from under me. I haven't stopped thinking about that sentence since. That's why I'm posting here. I don't know how to explain how deep that hit. I don't think anyone else at the party noticed. But I did. The way she said it wasn't cruel. It wasn't even meant to be hurtful, I think. It was just honest. But it felt like a slap. Because this was my home. My only home during some of the hardest years of my life. And yes, I ran from it. But it still lived in me. In my nightmares, in the way I parent, in the way I keep people at a distance. When I brought Ruby here, I hoped it would feel safe. Familiar. Like the best version of the past I could salvage. But what Nora said, it made me question whether I ever actually had that to begin with. I haven't confronted her yet. I've just been sitting with it. Playing it over in my head. I feel ashamed. I feel angry. I feel exposed, like everyone saw how little I have together. How little of a home I built for my daughter. And that Nora had to step in and do what I should have done. At the same time, part of me is grateful. Because Ruby was happy. She's been drawing pictures of the party all week. I don't know what to do with all of this. Do I talk to Nora? Do I just let it go? Am I being overly sensitive? Or did she cross a line? More than anything, I don't want this to turn into another silent rift that takes years to heal. But I also don't know how to open this door without letting everything else come spilling out with it. I tried to go about things as if nothing had happened. That's always been my instinct: swallow the hurt, nod, smile, and move on. It's what I did in my marriage. It's what I did with my parents. It's what I've done my entire life. But Nora's comment that day burrowed under my skin. It echoed every time I walked through the hallway, sat on the couch, or opened a drawer filled with her neat little organizing touches. She didn't mean it maliciously. I'm sure of that. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. The house did feel different now. Better, even. But I hated that it had taken Nora stepping in to make that happen. What did that say about me? That I couldn't even make a home for my child without my big sister taking over? One evening, a few days after the party, I was sitting at the kitchen table going through Ruby's school forms when I found a thank you card she had written unprompted to Nora. "Dear Auntie Nono, thank you for the best party ever. I love you. The house is so pretty now. I want to live here forever." I stared at it for a long time. The words "I want to live here forever" kept catching in my throat. And then something broke in me. It wasn't just about the party. Or the decorations. Or even what Nora said. It was about the shame I'd carried since I first moved back. The quiet guilt that maybe I hadn't done enough for Ruby. That maybe I wasn't good at this. And then, right on cue, came the voice I thought I'd long buried, my mother's voice. "You're always a mess, Helen. You always need someone else to clean up after you." I found myself walking across the street before I could talk myself out of it. Nora answered the door in her pajamas. I could see Dale and Mason in the living room watching some crime show. "Can we talk?" I asked. She blinked in surprise, but stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind her. We stood on her porch, under the glow of the bug zapper light, and I could feel my throat tightening. You said something the other day, I began. At the party. Her eyes searched mine. The home comment? I nodded. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. She exhaled slowly and leaned against the railing. I didn't mean anything by it. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I know, I said. But it hit me. Harder than I expected. She didn't interrupt. Just waited. I've been trying so hard, I continued. Trying to make this work. Ruby deserves so much more than I can give her right now. And when you said that, it felt like you were confirming something I've been terrified of. That I'm not doing enough. That I'm failing her. Nora's mouth pulled into a line. Her expression shifted into something softer, not pity, but something closer to recognition. You're not failing her, Helen, she said. She adores you. She watches you like you're magic. Yeah, well, magic doesn't pay the bills, I muttered. Or throw birthday parties. Nora was quiet for a beat. You know what I meant, though, don't you? Do I? She folded her arms. That house, it was never a home for us. Not really. You left. I stayed. But we both lost something. I've spent years trying to make it feel different. When Ruby lit up the way she did, it was the first time I saw joy in those walls. That's what I meant. I wasn't criticizing you. I was saying that maybe we both finally made something good out of it. That stopped me. I had assumed the worst, hadn't I? That her words were a judgment. A jab. But maybe it had just been a truth, raw and clumsy like most truths are. Nora looked down at her hands. You think I don't doubt myself, too? You think staying made me strong? It made me tired, Helen. For years, I felt stuck here. Like I was dragging around all of Mom's ghosts. I kept the house because I didn't know who I was without it. Not because I thought I was better than you. I didn't know what to say to that. So we stood there in silence. The kind of silence that felt less painful than before. Things didn't magically resolve after that conversation. We didn't have some grand, sobbing hug or go on a sisterly coffee date. But the next morning, Nora brought over muffins and helped me hang Ruby's artwork on the wall. I let her. And when I noticed the way Ruby smiled at the sight of her drawings above the fireplace, I realized something else. It didn't matter who had taped them up. It mattered that they were there. That the house finally had a heartbeat again. The truth is, I'd been scared of this place for most of my life. It held too many memories. Too many fights. Too many ghosts in the wallpaper. But lately, I've started walking through it differently. With a little more steadiness. With fewer apologies in my bones. I still don't have everything figured out. But Ruby is laughing again. I'm working again. I'm trying again. And Nora, for all our wounds, is part of this chapter, whether I expected her to be or not. The following week passed without incident, but with an undercurrent of something new between Nora and me. Not quite comfort, not yet, but a mutual easing. Like we had taken off coats we didn't realize we were wearing. Every time she came by, the tension that usually buzzed under my skin didn't show up in full force. Ruby sensed it, too. She started drawing pictures of the three of us, her, me, and Auntie Nono smiling under a sun that always had eyelashes and bright pink cheeks. It was sweet. Painful, too. Because those little drawings were everything I wished we'd had as children and everything I couldn't quite give her on my own. I was back at work by then. A small bookstore on King Street hired me part-time. The hours were flexible, the owner was kind, and the pay wasn't great, but it was something. Every dollar I made went into slowly transforming the house from a place I was merely surviving into something that actually held us. I started with the living room. Bought a second-hand rug from a lady in Mount Pleasant who was downsizing, then found a coffee table on Facebook Marketplace. I rearranged the furniture, a few pieces Nora had left behind, and added a $12 plant from Lowe's that Ruby insisted on naming Jeff. One night, as I tucked her into bed, Ruby asked me, "Mom, are we staying here forever?" I hesitated. It was a loaded question. Was here the house? Charleston? This life post Derek? I don't know about forever, I said honestly. But we're not going anywhere for now. She nodded and smiled like that was enough. 2 days later, Dale invited Ruby and me over for dinner. I think it was Nora's idea, but she presented it like it came from him. I accepted, though I still felt uneasy around Dale. He was polite, smart, clearly a good father and husband, but he reminded me too much of Derek in subtle ways: the calm voice, the steady career, the way he always seemed to know the right thing to say. Still, the evening went smoothly. We had grilled chicken and roasted potatoes and some kind of green bean dish that tasted like childhood. Mason even emerged from his bedroom long enough to talk to Ruby about her new coloring set. Nora seemed relaxed. Almost herself. Then halfway through dessert pecan pie, my mother's old recipe, Nora said something that made me almost drop my fork. "You know," she said, "Mom hated this recipe. Said the filling was too sweet and the crust was lazy." Dale raised an eyebrow. "Then why did you keep making it every year?" Nora smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Because it's the only thing Helen liked that came from that kitchen." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. I didn't even remember that. But as I looked at her, I realized she had remembered. She'd remembered that even in a house where joy was rationed like sugar in a war, I had clung to the smallest sweetness I could find. After Ruby went to sleep that night, I sat on my porch alone, staring across the street at Nora's house. Her porch light was on. So was the soft blue glow of her living room TV. It looked like something out of a postcard. Comfortable. Stable. Mine still felt like an old song I didn't know the words to. But we were humming the same tune now, at least. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Nora in my kitchen. She was organizing my pantry, humming a Fleetwood Mac song. "Do you still have a key?" I asked, setting my bag down. She turned, not looking the least bit guilty. "I do." "Want me to give it back?" I thought about it. "No. Just, maybe use it less often." She smiled, and I could tell she understood the boundary beneath the joke. "Fair enough," she said. "I brought you some soup. Ruby said she wasn't feeling great this morning." I looked over at the stove. A pot was already simmering. Chicken and rice. The same kind our mother used to make when we were sick, though Nora's version didn't come from a can. "Thanks," I said. "For everything." Again. She waved it off, but something flickered behind her eyes. A pause. Like she wanted to say more. "Helen," she said slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why didn't you come to the funeral?" There it was. She had never asked. I had never explained. We'd both danced around it for years, pretending it didn't matter when it absolutely did. I sat down at the kitchen table, unsure where to start. I looked out the window at the hydrangeas she had planted by the front steps. They were blooming again. "I couldn't," I said finally. "I tried. I even packed a bag. But I couldn't get on the plane." "Why?" Her voice wasn't angry. Just tired. "I was afraid I'd be expected to say something nice about her," I said. "And I didn't have anything left." Nora sat across from me, setting her hands gently on the table like she was bracing herself. "She was awful to us," I added. "I know she was sick. I know you did everything. But I couldn't pretend anymore." "She wasn't all awful," Nora said quietly. "I know." We sat in silence for a moment. "I think I needed you there," she said, eyes on her folded hands. "I know," I replied. "And I'm sorry." She nodded. "Just once." And that was all we said about it. The next day, she didn't let herself in. She knocked. I opened the door and found her holding a small box. "These were in Mom's dresser," she said. "I think they belong to you." Inside were things I hadn't seen in decades: a crumpled ribbon I won for a spelling bee in 3rd grade, a photo of me in my high school play, a birthday card I made for Nora when she turned 15. The handwriting was crooked and careful. It read, "You're the best sister ever." I don't remember writing it. But I must have meant it. Nora didn't stay long that day. She said she had errands to run. But the moment she left, I closed the door, sat on the couch, and cried, not from sadness, but from the slow, strange relief of remembering we had once loved each other in the purest, simplest way. Before the silence. Before the resentments. And maybe that love wasn't gone. Maybe it had just been waiting in a box somewhere. After that afternoon, something between us shifted for good. Not dramatically. No fireworks or sudden emotional breakthroughs. But something subtle, like a tense knot in the air between us, had finally loosened. Nora and I talked more. About Mom. About our childhood. About all the little fractures that had formed in the walls of that house, not just literally, but emotionally. And we talked about Ruby, about what she needed, what she deserved, what we both wanted to give her now. In those quiet conversations, I started to realize how much Nora had sacrificed over the years. She had stayed out of duty, yes, but also guilt. Responsibility. The same weights I had been carrying in a different form. And yet, as time passed and Ruby grew more at ease in our home, I began to rebuild not just the house, but myself. I started buying fresh flowers from the Sunday market. I painted Ruby's room pale green. I learned how to fix a leaky faucet from YouTube and surprised myself by managing it without cursing once. The house slowly became something I was proud of. It had pieces of me in it now, not just the ghosts of our mother, or Nora's well-meaning but smothering influence. It was mine again. Ours. Still, there was one piece of unfinished business. Derek. For months, he'd been mostly silent. He sent the occasional child support payment, late and begrudgingly. No phone calls. No birthday card. Nothing of value. Ruby had stopped asking about him after a while, something that broke me more than I let anyone see. But then, one afternoon in early spring, a certified letter arrived addressed to me. It was from Derek's attorney. He was getting remarried. To Cassandra, the 29-year-old Pilates instructor. They wanted Ruby to fly out to Arizona for their wedding. The letter included a draft of an informal agreement asking me to let Ruby attend without me. I was stunned. There was no phone call. No invitation. Just an expectation. That I would smile politely, pack up my daughter, and ship her off like a flower girl to a man who had gutted our lives and didn't even have the decency to check in on her health during flu season. That night, I sat with Nora at my kitchen table and read her the letter. She didn't say much at first. Just reached for her wine glass, took a long sip, and said, "Wow. He's really something." "I don't know what to do," I said. "Legally, I don't think he can force me. But if I say no, he might retaliate. And I can't afford a lawyer." She looked at me for a long time, and then said quietly, "Let's give him exactly what he asked for. Just, our way." The plan took a few weeks. It wasn't malicious. Not even particularly dramatic. But it was precise. First, I contacted Derek's attorney and requested a formal parenting mediation before any travel arrangements were made. I cited Ruby's adjustment disorder, a vague but real-sounding term I'd been given by a child psychologist who evaluated her after the divorce. That triggered a delay. Then, with Nora's help, I drafted a detailed list of travel conditions: only direct flights, only female flight attendants to escort her, daily check-ins via video call, return within 48 hours. I also insisted Cassandra be excluded from the wedding weekend if Ruby was going to be the only family member there on emotional safety grounds. Each time Derek's lawyer tried to counter, I added more restrictions. Nora had once worked as a paralegal and knew exactly how to write these in ways that sounded cooperative but were impossible to satisfy. Eventually, Derek called me. "You're being difficult," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "No, I'm being careful," I said calmly. "Ruby should be there. She's part of my life, too." "Oh, now she is?" I said, keeping my voice level. "Funny, because she cried for you for 6 months and you didn't even call." There was silence. He started to backpedal, but I didn't give him the space. I told him that if he truly wanted a relationship with Ruby, it wouldn't start with her being a prop in his new wedding. It would start with him showing up. Calling. Writing letters. Sending gifts that weren't last-minute Amazon orders. Until then, there would be no cross-country trips. No flower girl duties. No photos to parade around on social media. "She's not a trophy," I said. "She's a person. And you gave up your front row seat a long time ago." He never replied to that. But I heard through a mutual friend that he ended up postponing the wedding. Apparently, Cassandra didn't take kindly to her dream day being delayed over a difficult ex-wife. Boo-hoo. Nora baked a peach cobbler that night, and we ate it in the backyard while Ruby practiced cartwheels. We didn't gloat. But we smiled. The way women smile when they know something sacred has been protected. In the months that followed, Derek's involvement didn't disappear, but it changed. He became what I now call a check-in dad. A few scheduled calls, some predictable gifts, and no real presents. Ruby seemed content with that. She had found her roots in this home, in our new rhythm, in Auntie Nono's Sunday pancakes and our after-school walks to the bookstore. One evening, after dinner, Ruby looked up from her homework and said, "Mom, do you like it here now?" I paused, thinking about it. The house still creaked in the wind. The porch still needed painting. But the walls had warmth again. The kind that came from more than decor, from effort, from forgiveness, from growing up all over again. "Yeah," I said. "I think I really do." She smiled and went back to her spelling words. Later that night, as I curled up on the couch with a book, Nora sent me a text from across the street. "You were always better at this than you gave yourself credit for. Just needed time." I stared at it for a long while, tears pooling in my eyes, not from pain, but from peace. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't angry or cruel. It was quiet. It was showing up every day for my daughter when he wouldn't. It was refusing to let the past dictate my worth. It was rebuilding the home my mother never gave us and letting Nora be part of it. It was becoming a mother, a sister, and a woman I was proud to be, without anyone else's permission. That was my revenge. And it was sweeter than any wedding cake he'd ever cut.